Let's get started. Let me very quickly introduce myself. So my name is Saj Rai. I yeah. So I have more than 2 decades of experience, and I've been also training for more than 10 years now, providing training for many of the courses that you see here on the list. And I'm an authorized instructor for ISACA and ISC Square courses. Okay, so that's my brief introduction. And okay, so I hope all of you've gone through these details about the exam. And so this CRISC, now this is focused on risk management. So it says certified in risk and information systems control. And there was some changes last year. I just want to quickly talk about what they changed. I think it's a good change. So initially, the previous version of this particular course only had these 2 domains. This is only related to your IT, and so IT risk assessment and risk response and reporting. There were, in fact, there are like 4 different phases you can think about when you talk about risk. And so they've kind of introduced 2 more domains, which is governance and information technology and security. Now, I feel that this adds value to the learning material that you already have, because risk management is an important aspect of governance. Now, if you don't understand governance, then you just understanding half, or just understanding half of the entire context. So when you study governance, then you get the full context of why we do perform risk and so on, risk management and all those concepts. And also going back to the domain 4, which is it talks about information technology and security, the different controls and different risks that we have to deal with in more practical sense. So that also adds more value to this particular course, is what I feel. So it's a good welcome change, though it only means that you have to study a little bit more. Okay. And yeah, so all these details are here. You can always download the details about it. Let's do one thing. Let's take a look at the exam. Now, there's a question which says, why do CRISC if you already have a CISSP? Well, the CISSP, if you've done a CISSP, it's a very broad level course that you probably, if you've already done that, or if you're studying for that, you already know that. It's a very broad course, and there's a lot of context, a lot of topics that you need to study, one of which is risk management. Now, the amount of risk that you discuss in CISSP, it's very brief. I may cover that within an hour or two. Okay, it's just basic concepts of risk. But when you go to CRISC, it is a course dedicated to risk. And there's a lot more detail that you will understand when you study CRISC. And that is the reason why you probably would want to do CRISC. Okay, so in CISSP, we understand the basic concepts of what risk is, what vulnerabilities are, and maybe a bit of risk analysis, quantitative, qualitative, and so on. But then this course will go into much more deeper detail. Okay, so that's what the difference is. So it will add value to your CISP. That's what it does. Most of these ISACA courses, they are more focused on specific domains, and they'll go a little more deeper than what a CISP has to offer. So that is the difference here. Okay, so study more is not good change. Well, so from the perspective of knowledge, I think it's always beneficial to learn more. Will I be able to assess operational risks as well post these courses? I think so. Why not? Definitely, you should be able to do so. When you understand the concept, the basic tools you have, so then you should be able to do so. Do you provide us risk management template? We have all templates. And yes, definitely, there are templates. Even ISACA has provided those templates, and that is usually shared. You can always use those templates, yes. So here we have the governance, which is at 26%. Now this talks about the um, the governance concepts. Like for example, what are the governance responsibilities, and what do the management do, and so on, and what are these goals and objectives and strategies. Okay, so what's the difference between a goal and objectives, or a strategy? So we need to understand those differences. And policy standards, how are they different from each other? How are they related or different? And so this is important again to understand. Like I said, this context was missing in the previous version. So when they added this context, it makes more sense uh, to understand that risk management is one of the most important aspect of security governance, right? So there are many other responsibilities in the security governance, but risk management is one of them. And that's what we're going to, this particular domain is setting this context. And it talks about enterprise risk management and the risk management framework. Now, how are they related? It's enterprise risk and IT risk. How are they related? So they are, uh, so they are so they are aligned in the sense that IT risk is a subset of the enterprise risk. So that's how you need to understand. And we'll have to understand the three lines of defense. And this is an important concept, three lines of defense. So we look at the business, the operations team at the layer 1, okay, the risk practitioners at layer 2, and the audit team at layer 3. So this is the basic concept of your three lines of defense. So you want to have the operations team looking at the controls on a regular basis. At layer 1, they are using that every day. Layer 2, all the governance and risk and compliance, they are going to assist 1 in helping them achieve those goals. And 3, the audit team is going to make sure all of them are compliant and doing and achieving what they're supposed to achieve. So that way, um, this is a very nice concept again. Risk, I think three lines of defense. Okay, understanding the concept of risk appetite, risk tolerance becomes important. Okay, so again, risk appetite. There are other topics like risk capacity, or risk tolerance, or inherent risk and residual risk. We'll understand all of those topics. So risk appetite is the risk. Okay, for example, let's quickly talk about this. And risk capacity. Okay, we have capacity. Okay, and then we have the risk appetite. Okay, so risk capacity is the amount of risk an organization can afford to take. Okay, that's their limit. That's the capacity. And the appetite, risk appetite, is the amount of risk an organization is willing to take in pursuit of a particular activity. All right. Now, let's repeat one more time. Risk capacity is the amount of risk an organization can afford to take, the maximum risk they can afford to take. And the risk appetite is the risk an organization is willing to take in pursuit of its goals and objectives. Now, the question is, what would be the relationship between capacity and appetite? The appetite cannot be more than the capacity. So that's what this is. So suppose you have $1,000 in your bank, all right, and you want to, let's say, invest on bitcoins, and you say, okay, I have $500. That's my appetite. I don't want to go more than that. Okay, so that's my appetite. I cannot have appetite of $1,200 or $1,500. That's not possible. It's lower than that. And I can also say that well, so I may want to kind of say, okay, if my things go right, I may want to spend another $100. Okay, so if things go right, if I get a good returns, I may spend another $100. So that's my tolerance level. So that's my deviation. That's my deviation. I would call it a temporary deviation from my risk appetite. Under certain circumstances, I can have that tolerance set. Okay, so sometimes it's allowed to go up to, maybe in this case, go up to $100. So these kind of things we'll have to understand anyways. I just wanted you to understand a lot of these basic concepts in here. Okay, let me just read some of the questions that has come in. Governance clash happens sometimes. Top management said some decision, but stakeholders are not happy. How to deal with this situation? Okay. Yeah, so at the end of the day, you have to understand that the top management, they are accountable for the risk, for the security. So they will have to take that ownership. And it's that, so how do you, it's about that buy-in. How do you have that buy-in? Now, the top management just says, you go ahead and do this. That's not the right way to do so. It's about making the people understand and making them part of that entire process. So it's not about leadership concepts here. So and if it is something shoveled down your throat, obviously people will not like it. But if it is done with awareness and training and taking feedback and all the stuff, I think there will be better acceptance, and also making people responsible and accountable at different levels. I think that will also get their buy-in. So it's all about getting the buy-in. Okay, it's obviously there's a lot I can talk about, but that will go on. But these are some of the basic things that you may want to keep in mind. Another question says, our clients expect to prepare a risk management framework for them from scratch. Will this be helpful? No, I'm not too sure they're expecting to have a risk management framework, but because I would rather have some of the existing framework being used rather than creating something from scratch. I can use ISO 31000 or something IT risk framework from ISACA and so on. I can use one of these. So there's no point in anything doing from scratch. What you could do is you can use these frameworks, some of the templates from here, and help them with the process. So that is something that you might want to do. Okay. Yeah, so certainly, I think you must use one of the frameworks, whatever framework is suitable for you, and you can obviously tweak it a little bit, scope it out to meet your requirement or the client's expectations. Another question says, cyber insurance has increased. How does nowadays, how can you, so insurance is one of the ways to handle the risk, right? It's one of the risk response method. There are others as also, like avoiding and or accepting and mitigating all the stuff. Insurance is one of the option. So the question is it worth doing it? That's something that you will need to learn and understand. Okay. Yes, it's part of the risk transfer. So that's what you will have to understand. Is insurance worth it? If it is, then you go and insure it. Or is there something else that we need to do? That's what you need to be able to answer. Is we want technical and calculation of risk appetite and capacity. Is that a question?
Yes.
So can you rephrase the question one more time? What is it that you want to ask?
I have a question that how we going to be technically calculations of the risk appetite and risk capacity, how can we going to do some risk assessment we need to be calculate. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, fair enough. So most of these risk appetite or this risk tolerance level, they're set by at the higher level. Usually it comes from the top saying this is what your risk appetite is, or this is what your tolerance level is. So, and then accordingly, when you are you're assessing and assessing your risk, and when you're responding to the risk, you will use this value. So if, for example, they may say, they may tell you that your risk appetite for this is $50,000, or this risk is, we have a very high risk appetite for this. So whatever the value, it's given to you, and so accordingly you may have to then accordingly implement and take an action. Like I said, if this risk is the risk within the risk appetite, if it is, then we're done with it. If not, then we'll have to do something about the risk, making sure that the risk is within the risk appetite. And yeah, and that requires for you to do a little calculation. There are certain formulas we will and that is something which you'll learn during the course. Yeah, so we can have the matrix and all. That's definitely possible. There are tools which you can use for risk calculations. There are risk registers that you can use to manage your risks. So you can create those things based on the client's requirement. Yeah, and yeah, assessing the.
If I may talk, is it permitted? I just have one question.
Yeah.
I just want to reframe my question. Hello.
Please go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, we have a client. They don't have anything related to risk. They have newly set up. So, but the regulatory requirements is expecting that they should have a proper risk management framework, and they should periodically assess the risk and manage the risk and all these things. So the company want me to take care of the entire thing. So I wanted to have a risk management framework in place. I need to create something. So whether this course will help me to create a framework, or when creating the framework means on assessing the business, will I be able to tell the business that, okay, since you are into so and so business, on assessing your business, I can think that only you will be able to tolerate a loss of only of 50,000 euros. Anything beyond that is not within your limit. Or will I be able to set that? Will I be able to at least come into a figure that?
Okay, so anyway, so I will take your question once now, but this question I think we should probably have towards the end. Like I said, individual questions. But to answer your question, yes, yes. So the whole process is the course will help you understand how do you start with the risk identification, then move to risk analysis. Okay, understanding what the levels of risk are, and then respond to the risk, and then monitor the risk. These are the four phases, and this will definitely help you go over these. And you can take any risk framework, ISO 31000 or any other risk framework, and you can apply these basic concepts to identifying the risk, assessing the risk, responding to the risk, and managing the risk and reporting on that risk. Yes, that's what this course is about. Okay, but I will more specific questions, can I, if I may, take it at a later point of time? Okay, and towards the end. A risk is managed or not is referred by audit activities, but who defines that the auditor has done a job correctly? It may create a conflict of context of managing a risk. And please enlighten us. I'll take it up a little later on. Okay, so let me take it because I think we're losing time. Sorry about that. So I'll take some of this question a little later on. So anyway, sorry, we go here. As I said, there are four phases in a risk management process. The first is the IT risk identification. This is where we identify risks and basis the assets. First of all, we need to understand what the assets are. What are the vulnerabilities in the assets? What are the threat actors? What are the threats? Accordingly, we have some risk scenario development and we understand what the risk is. Okay, that's the first step. Okay, so whichever client you have or your own organization, you'll do this exercise, identifying the risk. After which, then you do the assessment. You'll understand what's the level of risk. I know there's a risk here, but what is the amount of risk? Is it high, medium, low, or is it $1 million worth of risk or $1,000 of risk? I don't know. So I need to figure that out. That is where we perform a risk analysis, and then the next phase is where we then, okay, we've understood that a risk is let's say $50,000, but my risk appetite is only $20,000. So I will need to do something to bring it down to that level. So I will need to treat that risk. I may have to take an insurance. I may have to buy some firewall or whatever the control is. Okay, so and so there are various different types of risks. Again, there could be a third-party risk as well. So after you have responded to the risk, and then there are controls there are controls which we can use. We'll talk about these controls also. And then after the risks have been identified, we have responded to the risk. Now we want to ensure that the risks is the controls are working effectively even after the risk happened. The point here is that once you implement the control, the risk environment could change. All right, so tomorrow there could be a new threat identified or a new vulnerability identified, or maybe some political situation changes. So risk environments keep on changing. And so you have to keep on monitoring and saying, okay, is this risk within my risk appetite or acceptable levels? If it is, no problem there. If it is not, then we have to do something about it. And we need to report on these risks to the stakeholders using scorecards or dashboards or heat maps. And these are some of the metrics that we will use: KPIs, key performance indicators, and the key risk indicators and key control indicator. These are some of the controls you will keep on measuring on a regular basis to know if things are going fine. Otherwise, you'll get some warning signs saying, okay, something's going wrong here. Let us take action. So these are some of the uh, indicators that will help you manage your risk. So these are the four phases, as I said before, and they've added all of these additional domain, which is, I think, is really good. This goes into the enterprise architectures and operations, project management, disaster recovery, data lifecycle management, SDLCs, emerging technologies like big data and all the stuff. This is again not so much into detail, but but I think this so this kind of gives you a lot more idea about how is this risk, all this risk that we talked about, how is it useful in what are the risks that I need to be aware of as a risk practitioner. Okay, so that is something which adds more value to your learning. The second section here talks about information security concept, frameworks and standards, security awareness training, business continuity, and data privacy. This becomes very important, like the GDPR and HIPAA and all those regulatory requirements and this is more introductory concepts here, but it'll help you understand, okay, this is where I need to manage risk and so on a more practical basis. So they give you these tasks. There are 25 tasks based on what you've just talked about. Okay, so for example, it says you should be able to evaluate threats, vulnerabilities, and risk to identify IT risk scenarios, or to be able to monitor and analyze KRIs, or whatever that tasks are. So this is something which I would want you to uh, understand, because these are tasks you should be able to identify. So it says here, monitor and analyze KPIs and KCIs. Now, do I understand what is KPI? Do I understand what is a KCI? Do I understand what are the differences? Can I create my own KCIs? Can I create my own KPI? That's what I want you to be able to learn. Okay, and that's what the exam expects you to be able to do. Okay. It says collaborate with the risk owners on the development of risk treatment plans. Like, who are the risk owners? What are their responsibilities? What are they accountable for? Okay, these are the kind of questions that gets asked in the exam. Okay, now so that's what this is. What I'll do is I'll kind of show you some of the questions, a few questions that we can take a look at, and then after that I'll take some more specific questions from you guys. Okay, Um, let's see. There's a few questions just to give you a sense of what the kind of questions gets asked. And what you could do is you can, if you want to participate, you can answer it on the chat window and mark it only to me. So 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, whatever the correct answer is. I can, and don't took too long. It's not more than 30 seconds. And after, at the end, I'll give you some resources that you could use. Okay. So, but for now, let's quickly do this. Not more than 30 seconds. Let's see if you, and give it a shot. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. Okay, just send it to me, 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, and I'll help you understand some of these basic concepts. Okay, it says an information system that processes weather forecasts for public consumption is most likely to place its highest priority on. Now think about any public information. Maybe it's a product information as well as a Apple iPhone. They want to put on some information publicly. So what would be more important? Is it confidentiality? Well, not really. If you're talking about public information, then confidentiality is not applicable at all. Non-repudiation is a very different concept. That is about non-repudiation is to ensure that a person does not is not able to deny their own action. So whatever action that they've done. So that's a very different concept, right? Suppose you have a CCTV recording or some logs, and based on which that person would not be able to deny the action that they've taken. So the question is, yeah, so these two are out, right? And then we're left with integrity or availability. So like I said, a public information, is it more important to have that information available, or you want to ensure that the information is correct before you make it available, right? So that's the decision you will need to be able to take as a risk practitioner. So what is more important? Is it making sure that the information is available, whether it's correct or not, or making sure only correct information is available publicly? All right. So I suppose you're able to figure it now. Okay. Just send it to me privately, all these answers. If you, there'll be a lot more fun for others if you send it to me privately. So as a thumb rule, what you need to understand is it's more important to have the correct information. That's the priority that you place on. Correct information, which means integrity is more important than availability. I'm not saying availability is not important. It's not that. It's just a priority. So making sure that verifying that it's correct information first, only after which making it available. Okay. So I hope you got the answer. You understood the concept. There's a lot of concepts that we talked about here, though. Okay. Here is another interesting one. Okay, just send it to me. Yeah, this one should be an easy one. I see. I see almost everybody getting it right and getting it correct. So risk management is all about making sure the risks are within the acceptable level. That's it. Okay, that's it. So again, for that, you need to understand what is the acceptable level. Now, who defines that acceptable? As a risk practitioner, do you define it? The answer is no, you don't. You will have to get that level, acceptable levels, from the risk owners or typically the senior management. Okay, depending on the scenario. So So you have to first understand the acceptable levels. Only then you can start working towards bringing it down within the acceptable level. So that is what this is. Okay, so now the basics of the risk is understanding the differences between a threat, a vulnerability, risk, probability, impact, all these concepts. Okay, likelihood. So yeah, just send it to me. Well, we define risk equals to likelihood into impact. I mean, these are the synonyms. I mean, you could have likelihood or probability, same thing, impact or damage, whatever. The question is likelihood of what? A likelihood of what? A likelihood of a threat exploiting a vulnerability. Okay, this, my handwriting is a little bad when I read on this computer. And then the impact. Okay, that's the basic concept again, fundamental concepts. And vulnerability in what? Vulnerability in the asset that you're trying to protect, right? So and so the threat will exploit the vulnerability. What's a vulnerability? Vulnerability is a weakness, it's a flaw, it's a loophole in the system, right? So absence of a security patch in the system is a vulnerability. Okay, so a lack of control or a lack of inadequate control, it is a vulnerability, it's a loophole, it's a gap, it's a it's something that could be exploited by a threat, right? Okay. Okay, some people are finding it easy. That's very good. Okay, good. This one I think is a pretty easy question, and yeah, I think you should be able to answer this very quickly. So the questions you'll probably find is a mixture of well, difficult and easy. So the one I have here are some basic questions. I haven't put any difficult ones, but you can expect difficult questions as well. Some questions are a little tricky, and so you need to be able to figure those out. And once you learn those concepts, you'll be able to figure these things out. So which of the following is not a valid risk response? I think most of you should be able to answer this. 10 more seconds. So there are 4 valid options: risk avoidance, risk mitigation, risk transfer, and risk acceptance. And there's no, I mean, risk rejection, well, you can try and reject the risk. You can, I'm not saying you shouldn't, you cannot do that, you can, but that's obviously not a valid option. It's not something that you should do. Rejection just means you're ignoring it, and you know it's there, you're not doing anything about it. So just rejecting it, it's absolutely wrong to do so. Ideally, what you might want to do is assess the risk. If the risk is within the acceptable level, then accept it. If not, then do something about it. Okay, so rejecting the risk is definitely the wrong way to do that. Okay, this is a very basic, simple question. And let's see if you're kind of scoring yourself and see how much you score out of 10. how much you score out of 10. Just keep a tab on your score. Let's see. This is question number 5. So you can write 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, and just send it to me. So I just talked about it, and there are synonyms, right? So you can see the word probability, likelihood, okay, and they're the same. Damage potential, consequence, impact, and so on. These are again pretty much similar, and what we're looking for is not a correct expression. We're looking for an incorrect expression. So 10 seconds more. I think I can see most of you correct. Some of you are not, but you need to understand these. So, yeah, so answer is D, likelihood into threat exploiting the vulnerability. The vulnerability is missing here, right? The probability and likelihood are the same, synonyms. Damage, potential, impact, consequences, these are all synonyms again. So they're ABC, pretty much the same thing, right? I hope all of you understand what's a phishing attack. At this level, you should know this. This is again a simple, one of the simpler question, one of the easier question, I would say. Okay, as a risk practitioner, you should be able to figure out what are the controls that I can have for this particular threat. Okay, now in this case of phishing attack, as you might know, it's not a technical attack. So this is a more of a psychological attack, and none of these technical solutions is going to be very helpful. So the best control for this is your end user awareness. So that's something that can help you with the phishing attacks. Okay, this one's one little difficult one. Let's see if we can figure this out. Okay, so it's which of these characteristics demonstrate that the KPI is realistic and based on important goals and values? So we want the KPIs to be specific to a particular thing, like if you're measuring the availability or some kind of performance. So yeah, this is all part of the SMART. Yes, that's a good point. Yes. So is it measurable? Is it attainable? Is it relevant? So which of these is related to the fact that it is important to the organization? Okay, and the answer is an attainable KPI is one that is realistic and based on important goals and value. Okay, so attainable means it is something that you can do. It's realistic. This one again, based on our discussion, should be easy. Yes. Okay, so 10 seconds more. Yeah, so well done. This is, I think everyone is correct here. This is because the business environment, the risk environments is constantly changing. So that would be the concern here. KRI, I know we have not talked about it. I'm not too sure how many of you understand KRI. It's anyway, so if I explain it to you, the answer will be there. But let's see if we can, how many of you can answer this correctly, and which means that you know what KRI is. So when you see the word here, most essential, it's quite likely that there are more than one correct answer. So don't just select the one which is the correct you feel is correct, because all the answers could be correct here. We're looking for the one which is the most correct. Okay, what is the most essential attribute of a KRI? Okay, so the whole reason we have a key risk indicator is so that you can get an early warning of a risk event. I can tell you immediately, hey, the systems have not been patched for the last 30 days, which means that there is a risk of of a system compromise. So you get that early warning, 30 days, boom, and you get an early warning saying, hey, listen, you got to do something about it. So it has to be predictive. That's the whole purpose of having a KRI. I mean, all of these things are important, but the most important, of course, is that it should be predictive. It should be able to give you an early warning of a risk event. Again, this is another slightly more difficult question, because the difficulty increases when you have all the correct answers and you got to select the one which is the most important. Sometimes it could be a little subjective, but once you understand the thumb rules, then you know, okay, for this is what has to be the correct one. And that you will study and learn these things. But in this case, all the options are correct. We are looking for the most correct option. All right, so the answer is that a metric is linked to a specific risk. Okay, so KRA is very important. It's linked to a particular risk only. Okay, that's the most important here. Okay, let's see your scores out of 10. Very good. Okay, so we have a little time. We're running out of time. I want to do more questions. Okay, should we do more questions, or do you want to take do you want to ask question, discuss? Okay, so I think yeah, so let's do a few more questions. I think I can see many of you saying let's do more questions, but I'll be very quick about it. Okay, so not more than 20 seconds per question because we have very little time, and then we can go into Q&A. Okay, 10 seconds more. So one of the reason you have a maturity model like a CMM model, capability maturity model, is to understand where you are and continuously improve your processes. This is all about improving the processes of a risk management model. So moving from, let's say, low quality to high quality, okay, high risk to low risk. So that's what you want to move towards. These are slightly more difficult questions now. Risk scenarios, top down, bottom up. Again, only if you've studied this, you'll be able to answer this question. We'll just do 5 questions more, okay? Ten seconds more. I know this is a little tough, but I am sorry I'm not able to give you more time. So what happens in the exam also, we have limited time, right? And so you want to be able to, either you know the answer, you answer it and move on, or you don't know the answer, so you maybe pick one and mark it for review and then come back later on. Okay, so that's what you could do. I mean, you can't be on a particular question for very long, because then you lose out on the time. So time management becomes very important. So you got to hurry up, okay, and answer that and move on. So anyways, this one, I think there are many correct answers, which is very good. And when you're preparing risk scenarios, what kind of risk that the organization may face, a top-down and a bottom-up approach are both required. Okay, and if you don't know what this is, you may want to study about top-down and bottom-up approach. Okay, this one should be an easy one. Ten more seconds. So for a ransomware attack, I think the best way to recover is to have a reliable and fast backup process. Okay, I don't think you know this one, so let's move on to the next one. This one, let's look at this one, the final question. So one of the trick to answering the question in CRISC is understanding the different phases. Like I said, 4 different phases. Okay, and so we have a risk identification, a risk assessment, the risk response, and then risk monitoring and reporting. So if you understand what happens in each of these phases, you'll be able to answer a lot of questions. Now it says, what is the major benefit of an effective risk assessment process? In the risk assessment, you identify what the risks are, what the levels of risk, and so the benefit of that when you do a proper risk assessment is you are able to make a decision properly and have a proper response to those risks. Okay, so after risk assessment, if you are identifying all the risks, so you understand, okay, which of these risks are within the acceptable level, which are not, which are risks are more priority, which are less priority. So you understand all these factors, all these levels of risk, and then based on this information, then you can go ahead and then respond to the risk. Should I accept the risk? Should I transfer the risk? Should I avoid it? Whatever, you know. So this is all because if I have a proper risk values that has been calculated in the risk assessment phase. So yeah, I think we can kind of stop these questions because we're running out of time, but I'll be happy to take some more questions now. So let's take your questions. Risk is managed. Sorry. Sorry. Risk is managed or not is referred by audit activities, but who verifies that the auditor has done the job correctly? It may create a conflict in context of managing a risk. Please enlighten on this. Yeah. So there are. For the governance team, there are two things that will happen. One is they will receive the reports and feedback from the management team directly, and all these risk activities, they will probably get that. And the second is they will rely on the auditors, right? The auditors to give them that independent report. Now, who verifies that the auditor has done the job correctly? Now, that's a interesting question, because we are going to be relying on the auditors. So there are different levels of auditing that could happen. We can have internal audits and also the external audits. And you can also bring in third-party auditors to, again, certainly audit you as well. So at multiple levels, and when different people are involved and different levels of audits are involved, that could give you an idea if your first party audit is not doing a good job. So somebody else from outside can help you with that. Series, how can we get these study materials? I think you can always purchase that. Okay, it's available on this ISACA resources. How can we get the practice approach to doing risk management? Do we get the virtualized labs available? You don't need a lab for risk management. Okay, what I will give you, hold on, is hold on, this is your ISO 31000 document, which is currently available, and you can use this. I've shared the link with you. Okay, so they've given you this materials available online, and I will suggest that you read this document till the time it's free available, because the ISO documents you actually need to pay for that. So this is available for free for now, and also if you become members of ISACA, they give you a lot of different materials, which are most of them are free of cost, some which you may have to purchase, but most of them are free of cost. So you may want to you'll get all these templates for risk templates, risk IT risk framework, and many other resources that you can get once you're a member. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. There is a question: does risk management a vertical skill to GRC? I'm not able to understand the question. So GRC is governing risk and compliance, right? So risk management is, okay, so to understand risk management, if you were to ask what is the best way to ensure that the organization has a very mature risk management practices, if that's the question, and the answer is when every process, especially business processes, you're performing risk assessment. Like, for example, you want to launch a new product. Are you performing risk? Are you performing risk assessment? Or there's a new project, there is a new marketing campaign being launched. So Ideally, risk management should be integrated into your processes. Okay, GRC team will help you, with the monitoring. Like I said, the 3 levels of defense. The first level, it should happen at the operations business level. The GRC team will come into the second level and help you and monitor you, whatever. And third level is the audit level. So GRC will help you with the implementation. I hope that is clear. How much study needed on this daily basis? That depends on your time, but it's a regular study, couple of hours. I would say the more you can study, the better. And in 1 or 2 months of dedicated study will take you a long way. So there's no shortcut to these exams. Okay, how tough is the exam? It's fairly difficult, but if you understand the thumb rules, you understand the concept, then it should not be very difficult. Okay, what jobs we can apply after CRISC certification? So CRISC is for risk practitioners. Now, who needs to practice risk? It could be anybody in the team, anyone. So it could be right from an IT manager to a project manager to a business owner, and it could be anybody who could benefit from this certification. There could be a dedicated role of a risk practitioners, and I know a lot of people are doing that. Their role is of a risk practitioner, so they will definitely benefit from this. But like I said, this is not necessarily for only risk practitioners. Anybody who, risk, because like I said, the best way to manage risk is that the risks are integrated into everything. So anyone would benefit from this, and so yeah, that is something that you'll benefit from here. How many hours of the course? I think course for about 32 to 40 hours, I think. Do we need any framework to learn along with CRISC job point of view? Ideally, yes. So the references like 31,000, I think, is a great reference. Yeah. How do we quantify the data? For example, ERP service carrying the data for entire organization. Now we need to assign the dollar value to the ERP data to quantify the risk. Well, there are different ways of assigning the asset values. For example, original cost, or the depreciation cost, or net NPV, and there are many different concepts. We will discuss some of these things. I will not be able to discuss it now, but there are different methods definitely to arrive at some number. And again, the question is, who should be the one to provide this asset value? Is it the risk practitioner? And the answer is no. It is not the risk practitioner's job to quantify the data. So it's the owners of these business processes who can provide you with the value. Okay. Anyways, there are certain like methods. The exam doesn't get into those details, but if you want, you can learn these methods like net present values and the various different original costs, depreciation costs, and many of those things that we can keep in mind. How about NIST risk management framework? It's something that you should definitely refer to. I highly recommend NIST documents. Risk management scope for geolocations. How can we assess risk? I'm not able to understand the question again. So could you use the mic or maybe frame it again? Are you saying that what are the risks if you have business across multiple countries? If that is the question?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes,
then
you're right.
all right. In that case, we got to think about, there are multiple risks, right? So when you think about a risk scenario, the multiple risks, one of the important risks they might ask you in the exam would be the privacy issue. So regulatory privacy issues, right? So that could be number one. Okay. Other things like geopolitical and all those things will come in, but the most important would be, like, for example, you have a EU citizens data. Can you transfer it to another country? Can you take it to the US or to India, and can you use that? Maybe yes, maybe no, right? So things like that. So you need to understand the regulatory requirements, regulatory laws, especially when it comes to collecting data from various different countries. So yeah, so a bit about GDPR, HIPAA, and all those things we'll need to understand. Yes. Post getting certification, how to carry out the currency for what is the validity of the certificate? That's a very good question. So the certificates are only valid for 3 years. And the question is, do we need to take an exam after that? And the answer is no. The answer is no. What you need to do is, there are two things you need to do. One, let me quickly explain this to you. So you need to earn CPEs. Okay, there's a continuing educational point that you need to earn. There are many activities you can do. For example, a basic um, a basic 1 hour webinar could earn you about 1 CPE, 50 minutes rather, 1 CPE. So that's it. Okay, so that you can study, you can take another course, and you'll earn a lot of CPEs. So I'm so around, let's say 30-40 hours of learning in a year. I don't think that's a big amount. So that you need to do. And apart from that, you need to pay some maintenance fees as well. Okay, and once you do that, you're certified. But if you don't do this, you could lose your certification. Okay, if you don't earn the CPs, if you fail to maintain this, and if you are not ethical, and so on, you will probably lose that certificate. But it's easy to maintain the certificate. It's not a big deal. Is there any use of the certificate after they expire? Well, depends. It depends. Ideally, you want to not lose it because you worked hard on it, you paid for it, and it's I think it's important to maintain it. But it depends. You can always, I mean, I don't know what's the use you're going to have on it, and if you want to use it for your certificate, and you can tell I was a CRISC once upon a time, maybe that's also fine. I don't know. But I do. I'm kind of. I have many of my CCNA certificates which expired many years back, and I say I was a CCNA. It may not be much use to me, the certificate, but the knowledge certainly is very useful. Yeah. Cost of physical asset is easy to know, but very challenging to know the cost of data residing on physical assets like server. That is true. That is absolutely true. So, and so there are lots of different costs that you need to consider, not only the data cost, the reputation cost as well, regulatory cost. So these are exercises you need to do. Obviously, this is not something that, you know, the exam will tell you or the course will tell you this is the amount. No, you can't do that, because those amount are very specific to the organization or the specific to the situation. It will tell you, it give you the concept of how to go about it, and you got to figure out, sit with your the owners, the data owners, and figure out those values, because those are very specific to the organization. If we have a linked membership, so in which ways we can earn the CPEs from a LinkedIn membership? Okay, if you have LinkedIn membership, in which way we can earn CPEs from LinkedIn courses? Any possibility to get that CPE? I'm not too sure about the LinkedIn membership, so I am not a member, so I wouldn't really know that. But ask them; they should be able to give you some CPE after you complete a course. 40 hours, 1 hour course, 2 hours course. They should be able to give you some certificate. Okay. Does series cover all types of risk, or only informational related risks? Okay, so it's mostly focused on the information related risk. The principles apply to any other risk as well. So the principle of identifying risk or assessing risk. So these things will cover, we can cover to every other scenario as well. So the principles is applicable. Like when you take a when you learn about ISO 31000 or a NIST risk management framework, is it only for information related risk? And the answer is no. No. So the principles apply everywhere. Do I require CRISC certification to provide corporate trainings in InfosecTrain? Yes, absolutely. If you're planning to provide training without the certificate, might not be the best idea. Yeah. So yeah, you might want to do that. Yeah, you want to be certified first before you want to provide trainings. Okay. Do you have your own easier trainer guide for us to study? Not really. No, what I do during the course is I kind of use a lot of materials. I don't have one material to teach you from. So depending on which concept I'm teaching, I may have some exercise, I may have some videos, I may have some templates. I may use multiple resources to help you understand a particular concept. Okay. And the volume is not that great. I think it's not a big, it's like other courses. So I don't think you'll find anything easier than what the review manual already is. Okay. Will you share CRISC study guide, or we have to buy separately from InfosecTrain? So are you talking about the course in the training? So during the training, so we will provide you some materials that we will discuss later on, not in this forum. But the principle is that you will be getting enough study materials for your, if you're taking any training sessions from InfosecTrain, from CRISC, if any courses that you take, you will be provided with some study materials. If you want to buy it separately from CRISC, that's your choice. But if CRISC will provide you all the relevant materials that is required for you to pass the exam. This can be discussed separately with the sales team and so on. Yeah. Once we clear the exam, how do we apply for the certificate? Is there any requirement for providing experience detail? That is absolutely true. That's a good question. I know I didn't cover these points, but yes. So when you register for the exam, you pay for the exam, and then you pass the exam. Now, it doesn't mean that you are a CRISC yet. So you will have to provide documentations of your work experience. It's a very simple form. It's not very difficult. Simple form, and you have to provide some experience certificate and all. After which you supply this. Submit this, and then you will be able to get yourself certified. I'm not able to understand, Mahesh. What are you asking?
Yes, I'm asking that do you have any struggling to tackle the risk, to provide the management to convince that, hey, this type of risk is there, and the management is not going to understand your concern about the risk management. So
Okay.
what type of coordinations, what type of tricky things you want to play with them?
See, I think what will happen is when you study a course like a CRISC, it will give you the tools, the knowledge to start managing risk, right? Now, this is only going to improve with practice. For example, if you have to figure out what the KPI is or what the KRI is, right? So you have to then practice. The more you practice, the better you're going to be. So in the course, you will learn, okay, this is the KPI, this is how we derive the KRI, but then you need to practice this on your own, right? And you can always get back to me saying, okay, this is what I've done for my organization. Can you please check and give me your feedback on this? I'll be happy to help you give any feedback. And so it's a learning process. Okay. So once you understand a certain concepts, you may want to apply that. It's good to apply that, and you only become better with time and experience.